Good evening, everyone. I now call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Burlington Electric Commission held on the second Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m., 585 Pine Street. Today is March 11th, and the time is 5:06. Let the record reflect that the quorum is present, and our fifth member should be joining any second. Commissioners, you've received the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any proposed amendments?
No.
Great. If there are no proposed amendments, the agenda will be adopted as presented. Okay. The minutes from the previous meeting held on February 11th have been distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
No.
Okay, great. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained?
I abstained, so I wasn't here.
Great. Okay. Motion passes with 3 and 1 abstention. Great. And hopefully we'll have Scott soon. So let's see, next we'll now hold the public comment period. We'll open the floor for public comment. Each speaker is asked to state their name and keep their comments to 5 minutes. Are there any, we don't have anyone online.
I'll be the employees here.
Okay, I couldn't see that. Okay, great. Okay, so we have no folks for public comment. So moving on to the monthly impact minute.
We have
Yep.
Jen.
Great.
Hi, everyone.
Jen?
So I'm Jennifer Green. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Workforce Development here at BED, where, as you know, our goal is to reduce and eventually eliminate fossil fuel use in the building and ground transportation sectors. And I'm here just to give you a 2 or 3 minute intro into the Burlington 2030 district, in case you weren't aware. So this is one of, so much of what we do depends on partnerships. And I would argue that this is probably one of our most robust and helpful partnerships. The Burlington 2030 district was founded in Burlington in 2017. It's one of 29 2030 districts around the country. So this is a movement that was started by Architecture 2030 to bring commercial properties on board to reducing energy use, emissions from transportation, water use in buildings. So in most cities, it's usually the downtown core that is the district, but in Burlington, our 2030 district is essentially the entire city. And so working with our 2030 Executive Director, Jenna Antonino Dumari, we partner with the Vermont Gas Systems to visit property owners, volunteer property owners together, and to give them whole building data to help them make smart decisions about how they can reduce their energy load. One of the things that we developed as part of our Burlington 2030 district, and what's unique, are these things called property energy plans. It's a tool that we developed, which not only sort of recaps where the building is in terms of energy use intensity, but gives them goals on how they can continue to reduce their load. So, Chris Burns, as you know, is the Director of Energy Services, and he often refers to the 2030 district as a really important tool in our toolbox, because the 2030 district is another way that we can sort of reach out to commercial property owners and invite them to participate with us and our rebates. So again, it's an incredibly helpful partnership. What makes it so strong, I think, is how VGS and BED are in lockstep in working together with these commercial property owners. So both BED and VGS do support the district financially. I'm on the executive steering committee, and there are a couple of members of the BED staff who are on sort of the larger steering committee. So we really, it's a great partnership, and it's just something I think we should be proud of. Maybe not a lot of people know about it, but again, it's over 10 million square feet in Burlington have been committed to the district, and we have over 300 unique buildings that are part of the district and 49 unique property owners who are involved. And so all of them are able to get PEPs done, property energy plans, and then again, meet with the BED and VGS teams to think about how to move forward on the activities that are outlined in the unique pep. And that's my story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
great, thank you.
I guess I have one question. How does this overlap with the energy efficiency work, and how does like governance work? And
Yeah.
like, in theory, I would assume we would be doing it potentially anyway, but this is different because it's always in partnership with Vermont Gas, or how, I guess, how do I wrap my head
Well,
around that?
so Chris's team is out and sort of drumming up business and working on energy efficiency stuff. Sometimes it's hard to get the attention of commercial property owners. But, so the 2030 district can go out and ask for volunteers. This is all volunteer membership, of course, if they'd like to join. And so when they do, great, welcome in. BED and VGS are going to talk to you about the various rebates that we offer and help ensure that the services that we provide here at BED are made available. So sometimes it's really just another, I wouldn't say just, sometimes it serves as another sort of marketing tool to help ensure that we can get our rebates out and let property owners take advantage of them.
Okay. So the driver for them is obviously the efficiency gains and all of the wonderful things.
Right.
Is there also some kind of like badge benefit or reason? why-
You're a member of the district.
Okay.
You know, we do an annual event. We just had an annual event at the Hotel Vermont, and the mayor came, and we celebrate those buildings that are doing well. And so there's that sort of recognition stuff.
Great.
We also do trainings. We had a benchmarking training today, helping any property owner that wanted to know how to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So things like that are benefits in addition to this property energy plan that you can get if you're a member.
One last question. Is there funding coming from an outside source, or is it our funding?
Yeah, Jenna has received some outside funding. Most recently, we got a D grant, which is through the American Public Power Association to help draft this tool, the sort of template for the property energy plan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Really,
Sounds good.
like a really helpful group too for us, because when we're working on any kind of policy initiatives in partnership with Department of Permitting and other, departments, it's kind of a great go-to for, gathering some different stakeholders and getting immediate feedback on what's practical and how things work. So there's a real great value to us in having this group sort of organized that way, as a one-stop shop for getting good feedback from buildings who are already kind of on the leading edge of doing this type of thinking too.
I assume there's also like a cohort sharing lessons learned.
Yes, we have a
element to it,
steering
too.
committee meeting once a month. Yes. So think soda plant, think Main Street Landing, think Champlain Housing Trust, so folks can join the meetings and share ideas and lessons learned. And of course, as a member, you get sort of your meeting or meetings with BED and VGS to look at your building specifically.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Bye,
it.
everyone.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, next, we have the Commissioner's Corner. It's a time for commissioners to, any topics or thoughts they had brought to the meeting they want to raise. Commissioner Kinney?
thought.
Yes.
I have a thought on McNeil, and I've been asking these kind of in the last months of looking back, what drove the lower generation or lower rec revenue. And I know there's some repairs and capital needs. And so my question is sort of two-front of like, how, I think just putting out there, not to necessarily be answered in this moment, but how are we thinking about the capital needs and like potentially aging infrastructure? Is that already planned in, or do we think that'll become more of a risk since it's what, 1980-ish?
80, yeah, early 80s.
And, a biomass plant. So I think that was part of the question. And then as I was thinking about it, I was looking at the director highlights or whatever that's department highlights. And I was wondering, so we see generation, but would that be an opportunity so we see, I think, obviously it's not 100% ownership, but I guess my question is sort of revolving around thinking about oversight as a commission and how do we have visibility into those things beyond when we approve budget, or we see in our financials when produced power is less than budgeted and or rec revenue. And I think the only reason I bring it up is I think McNeil, well, it's important to our financials in future because it drives rec revenue and power supply costs. So I think just that's sort of where my head is at. So not an immediate answer, but like thinking about how we're looking at that as a commission. And I think just wanting to make sure we're thinking about the long-term capital needs of an aging plant that's doing wonderful things for the city and is aging.
Yeah, I won't go into all the detail now, but I would say we develop a 5-year capital plan for all of our generation assets. McNeil goes through what's typically in every 7 years, but it can be in every 8 or 9 years, depending on the runtime, kind of major overhaul where we really kind of take everything apart, put it back together, make sure everything looks good. The next major overhaul is planned for 2028 timeframe, roughly speaking, and we're trying to, as we talked about during kind of the last budget discussion, we're trying to kind of phase some of the costs for that so we don't lock in too early into
And that's
decisions.
a big GE turbine.
Correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
So we talked about the blades. We're trying to phase some of those costs to leave optionality for us because we also have due in less than 10 days results from our RFI about different technologies from the Valerity reports. We want to have a sense as we think about capital for McNeil for the future. It's both what you're suggesting is how do you invest in a plant that's a little older and needs continued maintenance, and we're doing that in the most prudent way we can do, but also at the same time thinking about innovation opportunities and what types of investments do we want to make that might be for efficiency or for stack emissions benefits or other things. So it's a complex question. And I think we'll continue to speak about it here, both in the context of the RFI and the Valerity report, but also in the budgetary context. When you look at our capital budgets, you'll see kind of what we're looking at year to year on McNeil. And it's a complex question to kind of manage both of those potential items together. But
And I'm wondering, and thanks, that's helpful. I'm wondering too, as we look, we had a draft calendar for the commission. Maybe it's something to think about as we move forward of at what point do we check in on generation assets, maybe beyond the updates from you or when you have timelines or deadlines, and what should that look like? Not to go over the top, but just in a way that's helpful to us to understand that picture.
And the biggest thing, the other big thing, and we're happy to do that and provide updates whenever it's helpful. We've known we were going to produce less than what we would typically produce because of the heat sink issue. So we've been running at 45 instead of 50 pretty much since the last outage because we knew the cleaning of the heat sink didn't fully address the issue. We're going to fully address it in the April outage. When we come back from the April outage, I would expect generation, assuming that's a successful fix, will be back at the 50 megawatt level. So any sort of underproduction relative to what we expected will be resolved at that point. It's not sort of a endemic to the plant long term because it's aging. It's more that we had a discrete issue that we had to fix.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
so something to think about as well.
Yeah, I build on completely independently from Ally, but same sort of question in terms of and the second part of her question, the operation and efficiencies versus say what the electricity price is at the ISO New England grid versus here. I mean, looking through some of the finances, I mean, my summary would be that it looks like we're, again, for one reason, the heat sink being down, but we're lower production than even budgeted, and also with spikes in energy prices, which due to the cold weather and just me driving by on 127 and not seeing any steam coming out of the plant, sort of like, are we running today or not? And this is in February, so just a circumstantial thing. But is there a way to track almost daily the operation of the plant versus the ISO grid? The reason I asked, I just went on and did a quick graph of the ISO grid price for Vermont, Northwest or whatever. And yeah, it looks a lot different this year than last year, and probably other years look very similar. But then given world situations and energy supply, are we heading into a time that's going to look more like that big spike like there versus fossil fuel? So that's, I guess, my general ask is there a way that we can sort of look at opportunities to say, well, we missed this opportunity and we have to pay more for electricity rather than being able to run McNeil?
And before I answer, I just got a text from Munir a couple minutes ago that they weren't hearing anything for a little bit online. Is that still the case? Munir, can you hear us? Just want to make sure it was coming through okay. Veneer said about 3 minutes ago, maybe they lost sound or. Just want to double check before I respond.
Just chatted me that they
You're not? Oh. Wonder why. The recording is okay? Huh.
Travis, didn't you switch something like 4 or 5 minutes ago and did not do it?
Are we switching these or are you? Oh,
I think he's doing it.
okay.
See the only one.
Emily said she it cut out.
Okay. We'll pause for a minute.
Pause,
Yeah.
Move for a recess,
Yeah. Move for recess.
It's more food.
5-minute recess.
Are you being serious?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Scott's not on, we're trying to get him on.
Yep.
And we gotta fix the sound quality. Yeah.
Do it.
Is there?
Motion for a recess.
I move for a recess.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 You have to leave. Should I announce that I have to leave early?
Everyone has to pass. Yeah, I know it. You sent me those.
Travis, one of my places, the town meeting volume is okay. That, you know, pick these off.
You're signing back in? Oh, okay.
Like, in here. Do you? A little bit. Fine. Trial by fire again. We've never had a recess. First ever
Oh.
that I've been here.
Recess, I love recess. We run around.
I know. It's our kid's favorite thing.
Yeah.
You gotta put your slicker on though, it's
Yeah,
raining.
jump in a puddle.
Well, we thought it was gonna be a short.
I jinxed us totally.
You did.
I'm sorry.
No, it's-
I didn't think we would have audio
You think
problems.
we were gonna set a record or?
No, I just thought we would be done more like 6:30, but Katie said 7. She's looking like she's gonna be more accurate.
Like,
What do I win? Right.
3 minutes.
Now early.
Yeah, you don't believe that.
Is the sound fixed or are they still working on it?
I think it's still working for this. And Scott, we haven't heard anything from Scott. That
He's been trying to text. Yeah, he's been IMing.
No, I haven't seen.
he hasn't been able to get in the meeting, or
Earlier when.
oh, it's not muted currently
Under this,
on town meeting, but they can't hear us on Teams.
right.
Okay, well that's fine. So we're still live technically for town meeting, but we are not for Teams. So for some reason, the Teams folks can't hear us. Which really is just Manir at this point. I think.
Right.
Then you can't transcribe the minutes.
No, the recording is working, I believe,
Oh, is
right?
it?
Recording should be.
Yeah, but I'm
Okay.
muted, so the audio I'm relying on it.
It's
It
the
should be
town
okay.
meeting.
I think I can't unmute because then there's that.
It'll reverb.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It should be recording.
but I can always just do it the old-fashioned way by watching it.
worst case.
Oh, is that?
Somebody is trying to join? Oh, it's just
Oh.
Travis.
Is there any update from Manir?
You want us to say something? Yeah. Testing, 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 testing. Testing 1, 2. What's that? Oh, well, Oh.
Oh,
Talk loud enough,
Oh,
since we're smaller.
got it.
Okay.
So we,
okay.
Saying the official agenda recess. There.
Come back out then.
what do I say?
Back in session.
The meeting resumes automatically at a specified time or when the chair declares the break over. Just declare that the recess is over and we're.
Great, thank you. I declare that the recess is over and we are back into our meeting.
Okay.
So we were,
So back to your question, Commissioner. So the McNeil is underproduction is just one issue, because we've also seen underproduction periodically on the hydro and the wind. So when we look at the rec revenue, and you'll see in Emily's financials, like that's going to be a combination of items.
I understand.
With McNeil, clearly when the ISO prices spike, we're going to be online. We try to be online for as much of December, January, February as we could be. We definitely had some times where we couldn't be, where we had to come off for different reasons. And even now, when prices have been more moderate in March, we had a planned run for March. So we're going to stay online in March. We have an outage in the April timeframe. We want to generate enough, renewable energy kind of to meet our needs and the joint owners' needs is one kind of item. We want to generate it as much as possible during the higher price times and be responsive to that and offset the cost impacts that we will see from the ISO grid for our customers. So I think the place you'll see the nexus for this the most is really in the monthly financials. And it'll be not just McNeil, but the whole portfolio. And what we saw in, the last time and what we're seeing, I think, potentially again in February is a combination of factors, underproduction a little bit at McNeil, underproduction some of our other assets, not having all of our new hydro contracts online for the first few months of the year through no fault of our own. So we're seeing that we had less energy than we would typically have during that period of time. And the energy assets we had did really well for their own financials. Like when you look at the McNeil individual financials as a plant for January, or I'm expecting they'll look pretty good. But when you look at our financials, if we didn't have as much power as we expected to have overall, and prices were high, then you'll see the impact in the financials there as well. We could certainly look at doing some additional, I'd have to check with kind of the folks who have this information, but we could look at adding kind of an ISO price chart to the report if it's helpful, so you get a sense of like what ISO pricing was in the given month.
I find it helpful. Like
Yeah, we could look at that. That's not hard to grab. I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
A small follow-up question on that. Is there flexibility or agility in terms of planned runtime and planned outages? If, for example, oil prices are high enough that I know the temperatures are moderating, so maybe oil and gas aren't needed on the grid, but if that were the case, is there agility in order to push out?
Not a lot.
Or is it even worth it?
At the moment, it wouldn't be worth it.
Okay.
Maybe that'll change. We'll definitely monitor. But really, when you plan these outages, you have to plan months ahead with ISO, with vendors, have people contracted to be there at a certain point. And so if you were to change that, it would have to be for some pretty extraordinary circumstances, I think, beyond just sort of a blip in prices or whatever it might be. And certainly when looking at this winter so far, it was really like the January timeframe where we saw the just extraordinarily high prices. Even February was fairly moderate comparatively. So hopefully that's not the case, that we have so much geopolitical disruption that has that type of impact. But we can monitor, but it would be a big undoing to change that. And the closer you get to it, the harder it would be to do. Yeah.
just want to acknowledge Commissioner Moody and just say we are actually in the Commissioner's Corner. So if you have anything that you wanted to bring up during that time, just want to let you know where
He
we're.
said sound is non-existent.
Uh-oh.
So
Just getting it on.
While we're working on it, continue to work on that. Is there any other Commissioner Corner item?
We don't have any.
I'm gonna move us into the GM update, but then as soon as Commissioner Moody is online, and perhaps we can ask him in the chat if he had any topics for Commissioner's Corner. We can always come back to him, for sure.
Yeah, Katie's checking if there's audio in the chat. We're not getting anything just yet.
Just said no.
No audio?
Andy on, here, no. Yes, you did.
Oh, so Town Meeting TV is still getting audio.
Okay.
Just the Teams. It's not. Huh.
Oh, that's very good. 13. Yeah, 13. All right, well, we are recording, and
Did I get a second or two here and there?
so that's continued. Maybe we speak up right into the microphone, and we can just be really, pay attention to that and make sure that we're adhering to that. So
Sounds good.
turn it over to you for GM update.
Okay. Couple items we want to cover, first of which is the FY26 rate case, as you'll recall, was a 4.5% request that's been in effect as a surcharge on bills dating back to late summer of 2025. We had tried to negotiate a solution to the inclusion of some one-time costs in the FY25 rate case that were there in error, and the regulatory process did not allow for us to do that in FY25, so we returned to that issue with the Department of Public Service in the FY26 rate case, and we settled on a proposal to reduce the rate request from 4.5 to 4.33 as a way of reducing that to compensate for those one-time costs that were included in FY25. So what the final rate that will go into effect as proposed is going to be the 4.33%. There's obviously some overcollection from the period back to September through, now and the next month or so until this gets implemented. So we're working on submitting a refund plan for customers and some other compliance tariffs related to this. So customers will see likely a moderate refund to reflect that difference. And we will have the rate implemented over the next couple of months on customer bills, pending those compliance filing tariffs and those being accepted. So generally good news there to move that forward.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Would that be a bill credit, or do we have to issue refunds to every?
We haven't specified the plan as of yet, but it'll likely be a bill credit at a certain kind of level. And there's some precedent within other utilities that have gone to this type of thing where there may be certain de minimis amounts that if somebody's no longer a customer, we're not able to get them the relatively small amount. But if they were a customer and they had a larger amount due, then you can get it to them perhaps via a check or something else. But for customers who are current customers, who were customers when this went into effect, it would be a bill credit in all likelihood, pending acceptance of the compliance tariff.
So
Yeah.
Is our understanding what the total number is?
Dollar value?
Yeah, dollar value. Okay.
Yep. $100,000 for the record. I know the mics are not picking everything up.
Yeah.
So that's that item. Legislative, we had discussed a number of times, and we've testified now a few times on this extension of the efficiency pilot. We worked with the Department of Public Service on a compromise where the program would be extended. 60% of the funds would be reserved for a variety of purposes, focused primarily on weatherization and making things ready for weatherization, helping customers who might have roof issues or panel issues or wiring issues or asbestos issues, remediate those so that they can pursue weatherization. And within that 60% of the 60% would be focused on low moderate income customers, customers who need electric panel upgrades, things like that. The remainder would support our other programs, geothermal test wells, EV and EV charging programs, commercial custom programs. So we feel like that's a good compromise. The committee in the House is scheduled to vote on this either tomorrow or Friday, which is ahead of the crossover deadline by which bills have to be voted out of the originating committee. And if they vote it out, I would assume, but don't know for certain, that it might be on the House floor next week. So some good forward progress on that. And I included here something that I wasn't even aware of that it was happening, but was shared with me and is I think a really interesting bit of analysis from Rocky Mountain Institute, well regarded within the energy space. And they published a case study, and they were talking mainly about affordability and how utilities can kind of work for affordability for residential customers. They noted our efficiency efforts. They noted our diversified renewable generation sources, including all the different renewables that we have. And then they created this chart. And this chart that I included in the report is looking at a customer who had a 750 kilowatt hour usage, comparing us to Eversource's natural gas resourced. And obviously you can see there's a lot less volatility in our pricing, and also our rates, or our bills in this case, are substantially lower than what we're seeing if we were to rely on natural gas, as the comparison case kind of looks at. The other interesting thing to note here, and they note it in the kind of the footnote, is most likely our customer bills are actually quite less than what they're modeling, because they're not including the energy efficiency efforts. And I can tell you that our average residential customer does not use 750 kWh. It'd probably be closer to 450 or 500 kWh. So in all likelihood, the bill example here would even be lower than what's being modeled. But I think this is good both in the context of our strategy, from a resource standpoint of having a diversified resource mix and focusing on efficiency for as long as we have, and having stability in our pricing and not seeing those volatile kind of periods impact prices, and also seeing what it would look like maybe from a comparison from a neighbor if we were more tied to the market forces, more tied to natural gas. And obviously think about this also in the context of the budget that's coming up and the rate case that's coming up. And no one ever likes to raise rates. I know you all don't, we do not. We've had a strategy since the pandemic of trying to keep rate cases, low, medium, single digits, and trying to do regular adjustments, but not have them be shock adjustments. And I think it's always hard to tell somebody that things would be different and worse if we were in a different situation, because nobody wants prices to go up at all. But I do think this helps make the case that the strategy we're implementing, all things being considered, is helping us relative to alternative strategies. So I share this both in the context of energy, but also just affordability. I thought it was interesting. We've got the link there if you want to review the entire post. Let's see, I think that's pretty much what I have. I would say, obviously, Emily's going to do a bit of a budget primer later in the meeting, and then you can expect from us a draft budget and rate adjustment in April. And then we will have Board of Finance review of those could be prior to your May meeting potentially this year. I'm not certain of the dates, but they may be a little earlier than they've been in the past. And our final budget and rate adjustment comes to you at the May meeting for a vote. So we're working towards that. We're working towards putting the FY27 budget together. We're also working very hard to close out the FY26 budget and manage some of the different impacts that we're seeing, as we talked about earlier, in the power markets and elsewhere, and try to land that budget in a place that is in line as much as possible with where we want it to land it. So lots of budget items coming up in the next couple of months that we'll get into.
Possibility to have the calendar plan that we've had the draft of, to have some kind of some updating to it. Generally when General Manager Springer gives us updates on when things are coming in, just so we have visibility to that versus trying to draft notes.
You mean, so we have
Sorry, that was unclear.
Nope,
So
that's
we
okay.
have that
Yes.
draft of the calendar of what we're
Yes.
going to go over as a commission.
Yes.
And you just updated us on when some things are going to come into us.
Yes.
Is there a way to have an updated visibility to that, so I can just check in if I'm thinking, oh, I wonder when this is going to happen?
I
a
think,
shared space.
does the calendar not have those items on it?
Oh, I thought you were updating and making a change.
No.
Okay, that was just,
that-
okay, great.
Yeah, it should.
So that's the planned.
Yeah,
Okay.
should be pretty standard on the calendar, if I'm remembering correctly, that we would
Okay,
have the
perfect.
April draft and then the May final.
Great.
Yeah.
But I have been working with Elena a couple times over the last few months to update or change depending on conversations here. So but I think also you're asking a little bit about transparency and visibility, maybe, and just to make sure, like, it's instead of the stationary document we received months ago, is there a way? So I can just see if there's any other ability for us to have it as in a shared space that it isn't a
Security risk.
yes, right. It's again,
Great, thank you.
yeah. Yeah.
So can you give us an update? We had talked about new positions or regulatory assistance positions, and can you give us an update on the progress of hiring those?
Yes. So we had posted the PUC council position. We had some candidates who applied. We had interviews. We have decided at the moment not to proceed further with that process. We've actually closed the position, and we're going to review the position description, see about reposting it perhaps in the next kind of 1 to 3 months in an effort to draw an even wider candidate pool. So we may look at some of the kind of descriptions or responsibilities as outlined and just see if there's a way to make it more compelling for a wider audience. So no immediate action there, but hopefully be able to repost in the next, perhaps as early as April, but it could be a little longer. And then the other kind of key position here, knowing that Chris Burns is retiring, is the manager of energy services position that is currently posted, and we're receiving applications kind of in real time.
Great.
All right. Excellent. Are we ready to move on to the financials?
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
It says about every 10th word is coming through, so it's still not great.
Travis, is there a noise suppression turned on or something? Is it like? Okay.
Um,
All right, thank you.
What if you muted and I unmuted? Or that mess I did? Okay.
All right. Great.
Okay, good evening. These are the financial results for January FY26 and the fiscal year to date FY26. So for January, we had a net loss of $314,000 as compared to a budgeted net income of $139,000. So a negative variance of $453,000. Moving down from the top as usual, sales to customers had a positive variance of $130,000. Other miscellaneous revenues were $46,000 positive to budget. Not a rec delivery month, so no power supply revenues budgeted or received this month. Moving into operating expense, net power supply was $264,000 over budget. Within that line, transmission was unfavorable, but fuel was favorable with McNeil being under budget. The GT was called often due to the high energy prices. So the GT fuel was 1,800% actually over budget. It was called that often. But the McNeil variance was by far the greater in terms of dollar value. And purchase power was also unfavorable. We had budgeted to be long, selling power, net energy back to the grid. Instead, we were purchasing due to the underperformance of McNeil, as well as a couple of the wind projects, Hydro-Quebec, and the First Light hydro contract expired at the end of December. The Relevate hydro contract was not yet executed. So we had less energy than we had planned to have. So that all contributed to that negative variance of 264,000. Other operating and maintenance expense was over budget by 346,000. Combination of timing of outside services being unfavorable, uncollectible accounts being higher than budgeted, and a modest amount over on labor and labor overhead. So year to date, we have an actual net income of just over $2 million as compared to a budgeted net income at this point in time of just over 1.3 million. So a $770,000 positive variance. Questions before I move to the next slide?
I guess I have one question in terms of supply. You mentioned a number of the factors being wind and other. Is that something that was just a convergence of, was there a thread there, or was that just a convergence of unfortunate supply constraint?
Yeah.
Or said it
Just coincidence. Not, yeah, there's not linkages. Sometimes there can be. For example, when we had very low water in the Winooski River, so did other rivers in New England were also low, right, due to regional drought, low water conditions. But nothing of that nature in January.
I was mostly just asking to see if there was any like future proofing, like if there's something that was like, but.
Well, if I can maybe build on that a little bit. I mean, January, I guess traditionally is one of the higher cost. If we were going to purchase electricity, it's one of the higher cost months, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if, when you say future proofing, is there maybe a little extra attention given to that sort of time period of like January or January, February, to see if there are any other contingencies or any other issues that might be occurring at that time to try and minimize what happens? Because if this happens in June or in like May, it's not that big of an issue, I'm assuming, but it just seems to be highlighted more because it happened in January.
Perhaps the Relevate new contract negates that and kind of handles that for the future.
Yeah, I think the biggest variable is McNeil, right? Because the contribution of McNeil to power supply is far greater than the other individual resources, right? So even if all of our other, let me say this another way, all of our other resources would have had to overproduce at a pretty high level in order to make up for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the McNeil is running half a budget for like the last 3 months in terms of energy production. So
right, it was 35% off in January.
Yeah, and it's the big, well, I'm exaggerating, but it's the big flywheel. I agree. I mean, it's 10 times the Winooski capacity. So, yeah, as an example.
A question you had mentioned last time that you were going to be watching things closely, and in March you'll have a better idea. What's your take on your idea now? I didn't know if you meant March after March is done in terms of financials, or March meaning we're talking in March.
Well, both. We can talk now and we'll talk later.
March isn't closed yet.
Yeah, so we don't have February results for, the full accounting period, but we do have power supply performance, generally speaking, and it also was not on par with budget either. So I'm expecting
I'm sorry, similar to January. I'm for power.
similar, better than January, but not good, not on budget, and not an improvement from budget, right?
Okay.
So we're assuming March is going to be, sorry, no, we're assuming February actuals are going to be off from budget as well overall. And just this week, well, we reviewed the forecast last week, and the management team is looking at budget rescissions from now to the end of the year to try to make sure that we lock in some other O&M savings, to make sure that we land that net income. We expect that actual year-to-date net income positive variance is going to erode further in February. So we're trying to take some steps to shore it up for June 30.
And I have a small question that might not be directed to you, but when we have temperatures that are, we all of a sudden this water flow, how does the hydro work? Do you just hit, can you have like tons, like are the turbines just running at full speed and then all that extra water doesn't help?
No, well, they weren't running at full speed.
No, they weren't.
Yeah,
but
they
I'm
were getting
saying
a lot.
this week, for
Yeah.
example, like can you
Now-
actually gain when you have like crazy amounts of water flow?
Well,
Or-
up to a maximum.
Right, that's,
Yeah.
so like you just hit 100% for those week, and then you're not actually going to gain more when you have some.
Let me ask a question. My understanding of dams, I haven't gotten the tour yet, but I assume you just pump it back up and that's your limitation, right?
Well, yeah, so only so much can go through the turbines, and
Yeah.
we're 7.3 kW roughly. And I don't even think, Lincoln can correct me, I don't think we're at 7.3, or last I heard. We're more like 5 right now, last I heard.
All right, so it's the turbine capacity.
Yeah, and like, remember, there are some dams upstream of us as well that may be, benefiting from some of that flow and utilizing it. And there's ice this time of year that we're being conscious of, needing to break up and deal with. So 5 is a lot better than what we were seeing, a few months back. It was more like 1 megawatt, capacity, and then now it's up to 5. But yeah, it'll hit a max around 7.3, and it won't go, it won't go above that. So, certainly this time of year and into the spring, we're going to see better production, which is great. We want to see the production, but yeah, we're not even kind of at max capacity right yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Better than the drought that we were seeing before. Yeah.
All right, then I'll move on to the next page. So capital spending for January year-to-date was 4.6 million, well under the budgeted value for January of 10.5 million. So we are 30% spent of the entire fiscal year budget at this time. The distribution plant is 41% of budget. Generation plant is only 23% of budget. And kind of everything else is around teens percent. Cash for January was close to budget. We had total operating cash of 13.2 million. We had budgeted to have 13.7, so $500,000 worse than budget. Not surprising, given the net income variance, right? Lines up. And then the credit rating factors currently at a 4.27 on the debt service, 1.04 on the adjusted debt service coverage, and 140 days cash on hand. I also wanted to give the commission an update on our revenue bond issuance. The Vermont Bond Bank priced their winter pool last week. The interest rate is 4.1%, which is pretty close to what I had modeled. And we will, they are set to close on the bond issuance next Wednesday. So, And the city council approved the amendments to the general bond resolution that you approved in February. Those were approved Monday night. So they will, when the bond banks consent to those, which I believe they will give but not have yet officially given, then we will wait for either, a future refinancing or debt to mature, and then we'll get to the 2/3 majority of bondholders where those amendments can take effect.
And just with the days cash on hand, keep in mind that we're going to continue to incur capital, and there will be a period by which we've used up the.
That's a question I was going to have.
Yeah.
I mean, only at 30,
Hold on, can you finish what you're saying, Derek?
Well, sure. So just the current revenue bond, I think last requisition is going to be for January. timeframe.
We've only got about $57,000
Yeah.
left.
So we'll have kind of used that January. We're going to continue to incur capital February, March. We won't have those proceeds probably until April or.
We'll have them on March 18th.
Okay, March 18th. So there will be a little bit of a lag period. We'll get reimbursed for all the capital that's eligible to be reimbursed, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next financial report you see a bit of a dip in the operating cash before it goes back.
Right.
Yeah, that's all.
Good.
Okay, and I guess my question was more about the capital. I mean, at 30%, you're not going to do the full budget by year end, correct? Or by the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
So I guess that is bond money we do not take out. Is that my understanding?
Well, it's a mixed bag in a way because we budgeted for a much higher capital amount than we expected to spend.
Okay.
Because we weren't sure which projects were going to advance and which ones would not. To the extent they have labor attached to them and they're not spent, then you'll see that impacting the general budget because capital that would have covered labor, that labor is coming back to the operating, that flows through in different ways. So as we're looking at it from a management standpoint, any capital projects that we can advance that were in the budget that we can move between now and the end of the fiscal year, we want to move, and we want to move those that have labor even more so. But I highly doubt, and I didn't think we would when we came into the year, that we would spend the whole capital budget. And then you're correct, that's revenue bond funding that we'll be able to utilize for the next capital budget period. But, we reach a point typically around this time where there's a dissonance between the financials are ahead of budget, through the first 7 months. As we forecast, if you assume we spend everything that was in the budget, you won't land where you want to land. So we're trying to just take some steps now to lock in some additional savings relative to forecast. But yeah, we will likely undershoot that capital spend significantly.
Okay, and the key thing I think I took away from this is that you're trying to maximize the labor that you had originally put into there to minimize the impact on the profit and loss.
And keep in mind the McNeil outage is in April, so there's capital associated with that. Capital associated with a variety of distribution projects that the timing of which are going to be more in the spring, summer than in the winter. So we'll definitely use more than we've done, but it'll undershoot that full year budget.
That's what
for certain.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. There's no further questions.
No further questions? Great. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead and proceed with the next agenda.
Happy to. So this is an update of a PowerPoint that some of you have seen before. I presented this material to the commission in February 2024. And that February 2024 version is on the SharePoint site that we've created for you as just background information. But I thought with the budget development season coming up, that it could be useful to just sort of to put the numbers in context and share some historical data on costs and revenues and walk through the major components of the budget that we will be trying to balance over the next couple months together. So this is the FY26 budget in visual form, right? So you can really see here how dominant sales to customers are as our main operating revenue source, over 80%. rec revenue, rec sale revenue, 9.4 million. And then miscellaneous, which is largely EEU reimbursement, but that would be where the miscellaneous service fees, for example, conduit rentals, pole attachment fees, would also fall in that green pie slice of 6%. This is an important slide. This is the megawatt hour sales. This is the energy sold over the past 25 years. So you can see the system hit a energy peak in 2025 of just under 370,000 megawatt hours. We are, as of calendar FY25, we were at 323,000 megawatt hours. Did you have a question?
No, I'm
Okay.
thinking, but I had my hand up unintentionally, sorry.
No problem.
I'd love to see a forecast, your forecast view.
The forecast grows by 0.5 to 1% every year.
Consistently with what that is roughly, if you drew a line. From
Yeah,
2020.
from 23, 24, 25. Yeah, exactly. There's not a dramatic increase in kilowatt hour sales. And so with sales making up 80% of your revenue, if your underlying energy sales are not growing, right, then you have to find another way to increase operating revenues. It creates rate pressure, right? If this was growing naturally on its own, it would decrease that pressure to raise rates. So this is a key concept and thing to understand in terms of major budget pressures. This is the revenue associated with those megawatt hours. FY26 is purple because it's the only budgeted figure. The rest are actual figures. So you can see with the 12 years of no rate cases up until FY21, the graph looks very similar to the graph before. And only since we began doing annual rate increases have revenues risen.
What has been the average rate increase?
Like
The rate
around
increases?
4.
7.5, 3.95, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5.
So maybe like 5.25.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is rec sales revenue, which you can see hit a high point in FY16. Prices per rec were extraordinarily high. The market softened in FY19 and 20 and has started to come back a little bit in more recent years. FY26 rec revenues were budgeted to be higher. The actuals will be lower, but not because of the price per rec, because of lower volume of recs to sell. So this has, you can see 2010 and before, this was not an important source of operating revenues and has become so over the past 15 years.
And like, because they were so high in the middle of the last decade, I think helped make sure we didn't have to raise
Yes.
rates for a period of time. And some of the state policies that are involved in setting those prices, they've reduced the alternative compliance payment, which acts as the ceiling on prices. So if I recall, it was
Right.
around $70
Back here.
around that time. So you
Yeah.
might have recs that would trade for, $60 a megawatt hour or something like that. And now most of them are capped at around 40, or in some cases maybe 50, and the markets are not trading necessarily right at those highest prices. So there's still upside there, obviously, but it's not, I don't think it's as dramatic as it was in FY15 or 16.
So these are the operating expenses. So you can see 54% of OpEx is power supply. About a third is all other O&M. And then we have depreciation and amortization and property taxes and or payment in lieu of taxes. And then I did a comparison because I personally was curious around the distribution of operating expenses 16 years ago compared to today. So fuel is still 14%, which is interesting. Purchase power has shrunk dramatically as a share of operating expense over that period. Transmission has grown, almost doubled over that period. And other operating and maintenance has also grown. Depreciation has actually shrunk as a share of the pie.
Can I ask a question? How is transmission cost set? I'm sure that's a complicated answer, but
Yes.
is that simply because the cost per unit or however it's measured has gone up? Or
Yeah, I mean, put simply, yes, the rate for regional transmission has gone up.
okay,
It is a complicated answer. There's a piece that we pay directly to ISO New England through a transmission tariff. And then there's a piece that we pay to Velco through an agreement between Velco and the Vermont distribution utilities that goes back to 1991 in terms of how state transmission facilities will be funded. But then there's also a relationship between the New England tariff rate and the Velco cost as well. So I'm gonna leave it at that because,
it's good enough for now.
yeah. Happy to go into it in more detail.
It's not a controllable cost.
No, it is not a
Unfortunately.
controllable cost, right?
And it doesn't depend on purchase power.
No.
No, right. It does depend on our share of our contribution to Vermont's peak at the highest peak
Our demand.
hour.
Or our.
That's right, our demand. Yes. So this is why, part of why things like Defeat the Peak and the Building Giants to do flex load management, potentially a battery.
EV
That's right, EV rate, things that shift usage from a high use to a lower use. That's why those programs are important from a cost savings. Capacity is the other area where it saves money, but transmission is the other.
I like to think of it as like it's the cost to be connected to the system, and like how much you're using of the system at a given time is how they allocate the cost, really. So
That's local industry standard. We had the same thing in New Jersey
yeah,
when we looked at our business bill and like, yeah, how do we cut the capacity to cut our bill?
Regarding the fuel costs is interesting. Is that literally like diesel for BED trucks? Like,
It's McNeil Wood
Yeah.
primarily.
oh, it's power.
It's power supply.
Right.
So that's when I said that power supply is 54% of the O&M budget.
Oh, I see.
And that's sorry, I should have been more explicit. What I mean is fuel, which is mostly McNeil Wood, as well as fuel for the front loaders at McNeil and the gas turbine. But that is power supply fuel, generation fuel, purchase power and transmission. Those three things add up to 54% of the FY26 budget.
Thank you.
Question on the other big increase, operation and maintenance. Any comments on that going from 23 to 33%?
labor and healthcare.
Yeah, that's for
Same old
labor.
story.
I haven't dug into that and
Okay.
line by line, but I probably would
On
yes,
average, it's
agree
like-
that labor and healthcare are, those are the biggest items within that, as you'll see in a future slide.
Okay.
So, yeah. So here is fuel expense historically. This is a function of both the capacity factor of McNeil, how much McNeil generated in a year, as well as the price we paid per ton for wood, which is, kind of
it's
supply and
rate and
demand,
volume.
market-based,
Rate
right?
and volume combined.
Can you repeat what you said? I couldn't hear when Commissioner Williams spoke over you.
Yeah, so it's the fuel expense is a factor of McNeil's capacity factor, so how much McNeil produced in a given year, as well as the price per ton that we paid for wood fuel. And also, the output of the GT and the price we paid for a gallon of fuel oil for the GT. But those are, the GT fuel expense is very, very small compared to the McNeil wood fuel expense. So most of what you're seeing here is McNeil driven. And I was also saying that the wood cost per ton is, a function of kind of supply and demand and the local market for wood chips or wood products. And that's, we've seen some variations in that as different buyers buyers in that wood market have shifted, gone out of business, come on to be into business. So here's purchase power over time. This one has gone up and down, I'd say, with energy prices and the performance of our resources, at times in the market, the long-term contracts we've been able to execute. It was FY14, right? When we became 100% renewable. So, it's important to sort of think of the bars to the left from 10 to 14 as a non-100, this power supply had fossil and or nuclear in it prior to 2014. So over that period, costs have gone up and down. But I find it impressive that as 100% nuclear, 100%, it's a 100% renewable portfolio. It's fairly flat on average. Here's transmission. This is the ugly one, uncontrollable and inexorable in its rise. So this is another major pressure point in the budget every year.
Is that aging infrastructure or labor and healthcare that drives the cost higher from the?
Mostly capital reinvestment. So either replacement of infrastructure or new transmission lines, new transmission facilities.
And that'll probably continue to go up, I would imagine.
This is the whole thing where, like, people in the region are building a lot of projects. Some of it's to replace aging infrastructure, but some of it might be to improve reliability or whatever it might be. And ISO New England is going to, accept those projects. There's sometimes regulation at the state level, but there's also multi-state projects where it's FERC or even cross-border between Canada and the US. And so it's a complex process to determine what gets built. There's a kind of a built-in rate of return. So it's attractive to build. And as Emily was mentioning, like our share versus the rest of the region, if we're building and they're building at what different rates, like there's still a net value to Vermont of our being connected and what we're building being paid for by the region and us paying a share of what's being built. But at the same time, the overall amount is just going up so much. And that means that we're also having to invest, equity into Velco and support the continued, building of different reliability assets in Vermont. And so there's been some efforts to kind of have some cost control and discipline built into this process at various points. And Velco and the Department of Public Service play a role in the region for Vermont in kind of advocating for that, making sure projects that are being built that we're paying for are being scrutinized appropriately. But we're 4% of the region. So we have only so much, say in what's going on.
Vermont in total.
Yeah, 4% of the regional load roughly. So this is a huge driver of cost increase that is out of our control, outside of the things that Emily mentioned, where we can manage our demand and try to reduce our peak. It's a huge concern. And every utility is focused on this, not just BED. Everyone's seeing the same kind of trajectory.
Can I also ask a question? I mean, how does that impact data centers within the region, assuming data centers are the bigger users that are coming online?
Yeah, we don't have any yet in New England.
Okay.
There's active discussion in the legislature this session. There are 2 bills focused on data centers, one of which I think has a moratorium, and the other says if you come online, you have to kind of bring your own power resources potentially. So and that conversation's happening nationally, and we're a higher cost region, so most of the data center projects are happening in the Midwest or in the Southwest. but we haven't seen any in New England as of yet. Doesn't mean they couldn't happen. And that's exactly the questions that would happen if somebody came with a proposal is how are they contributing to this cost? How are they contributing to the other costs? Are they shifting costs onto residential ratepayers, or are they paying, a good share? And those are good policy questions, but we haven't seen any proposed for New England as of yet that are actually going forward.
Piggybacking off that, was wondering about that too. We looked at load growth, and we're mostly it's being pretty flat and stagnant. And so we talked about that being a driver of rate pressure, but then there's also other things like data centers that are going to be bigger users. Maybe they're so disproportionate. One of the things I was surprised to learn when I joined the commission was how much of our electric sales at BED are to commercial, small commercial industrial versus the percentage that's residential. And in the commercial industrial space, with all of the lighting efficiency and other things, demand has gone down. So it's do we want a data center to help grow load, or do we not want a data center because it's going to hurt affordability? And you have to get James Gibbons on the phone for this one.
No. I mean, I think the question, not for BED specifically, but maybe for the region, would be, do you want a data center, maybe, if it's going to contribute to, in a way that's beneficial to other ratepayers, and if it's going to have a load profile that's beneficial, that doesn't exacerbate peaks, but helps to flatten peaks, or if it's going to come with a renewable resource that it's going to bring online, because this gets beyond this presentation, but just for a second, the data center question, I feel like we had an imperative around, we want lots of renewable energy because we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the electric sector, and then we want to use that renewable electricity supply to drive emissions down in the thermal and transportation sectors. And this moment that we're in with data centers has sort of warped that conversation, and now it's this question of how can we build renewables to serve data centers, not to decarbonize the supply broadly, and then there's the whole affordability question. So what we want for Burlington, or what our vision is to grow the sales that were on that chart more than what they're growing now. It's good that they're growing because there was a period where they weren't. But we want to grow them ideally through electrification measures, like heat pumps, like EVs, like electrifying commercial uses, and converting more of our share of energy use to electric for efficiency, for cost savings where it's applicable, for emissions reduction. I would love to see us grow our load that way rather than just trying to solve it with a data center, which anecdotally, only speaking anecdotally, not every data center that comes into a community is necessarily driving cost reduction. And there was an event, I think, even at the White House recently about, trying to have ratepayer protection pledges for communities that are seeing data centers, because just adding more use without kind of concern about the profile of the use, the generation match, doesn't necessarily help. So the Vermont legislature is actively thinking about these items, though, and nobody's come to us in Burlington for this, this discussion as of now.
I think to tie it back to the transmission discussion, though, I think that it is good to understand the siting and where it can be, that reliability, and also that where there are already constrained areas, so that hopefully it can be won't exacerbate this or add to this. And I think, too, the interesting part about data centers is that while originally some of them might have been cited where there was more decarbonization policy, it looks like more and more the emergent spaces are where there's less policy. And it is that whomever is driving the data center creation is paying, but there is a big concern across the country about democratization of information, and that people, eventually it'll get passed on, and that folks, everybody's going to have to pay. And what does that do for accessibility to information, affordability, and transparency? So there's that kind of future cost question that we should probably, we maybe not in this area, but in terms of how we may touch it in terms of Belco or ISO New England, there could be some pressures there that might ripple back down to continue to pinch that affordability.
Yeah, I mean, policymakers are concerned about it. I know the region is looking at it, even though there's nothing kind of online at the moment. But even without that, we're seeing these challenges.
Okay. Move on to other O&M and how that has changed since FY10. So I probably should put like a rate of inflation along here for comparison. That would improve the presentation. And so then getting a little bit, so if you take the entire operating expense budget for FY26, which is in the upper right, and you just take that purple piece of pie, which is the other O&M, that's not power supply, and you look at what's inside that, about half of it is labor or salaries, wages, and benefits. Yeah, so that's the majority of that slice.
And do we have a benchmark of how that compares to other utilities or? Maybe, let me see. I only know from other industries, so I'm kind of curious what we might compare within this.
I have some data from the American Public Power Supply, American Public Power Association. I don't remember all of the charts inside it though, so I'll have to see if that is available. All right, so that's operating income, as you know from the income statement, operating revenues, operating expenses. And then as we cover each month, we have the non-operating income and deductions and interest expense, the quote unquote below the line items. Velco dividends from our equity investment in Transco are the greatest of those, around $4.5 million in FY26. The interest income line varies with interest rates. Obviously, that's our investments in banks. And then grants and capital contributions is highly variable depending on kind of major construction projects in the city, such as the Champlain Parkway, for example, the Great Streets projects. We receive a contribution for the, any infrastructure upgrade we do in conjunction with those, or street lighting upgrades that are done in conjunction with those projects. And then grants is dependent upon the grants that have been awarded recently, or the grant projects that are active. And then interest expense, the just over $3 million, that is our debt service, essentially. So the major, for the budget, we prepare an income statement, and then we also prepare a cash flow statement to make sure that we have sufficient cash flow over the course of the year, month by month, but also that our sources and uses are balanced such that we will have sufficient cash at the end of the fiscal year to be in line with our Moody's metric target. So these are the sources and uses, and I feel like there's something I wanted to say on this, but I can't remember what it was, so I'm gonna move on. Just in pie chart form, the sources, 77% are those operating revenues. Again, 81% of that is sales to customers. And then you can see the Velco equity, a little tiny bit of interest that doesn't even show. The grant income, the $3 million annual from the general obligation bond, whatever we have budgeted to come in from revenue bonds, making up the difference, or the rest. So in FY26, we had budgeted for about 107 million sources of funds, sources of cash. And then the use of that cash, we had budgeted for 93.8 million in uses. Again, most of that being the operating expense. Tier 1 rec purchases for renewability compliance with the Vermont RES. Tier 3 rebates, which we treat on an inventory basis, so that's a use of cash. The McNeil turbine overhaul, that's a major part, so that's kind of an anomaly, just given that we need to do that upgrade in the next couple years. taxes and pilot, and then you can see the capital spending for BED plant in yellow orange, and then McNeil plant in the dark blue. And then the debt service is about 10%. Oh, it's probably about capital is probably what I was going to talk about. So we'll talk about that a little bit here. Darren alluded to this. This came up earlier in the January financial presentations. You can see the FY26 capital budget was higher than it's ever been historically. You can see that that budget was just under half for the distribution plant. And the next biggest was the generation plants. That's what's called production. General includes IT, software, fleet vehicles, buildings, building improvements. And then kind of wanted to, so, you know, for me, looking at the capital budget, right, it's sort of like, well, we always have this, everyone puts in projects. It's always a lot of projects, and they always add up to a lot of money. And if you think about it, we have back to the uses of funds. Here's where I was going. Yes. So if you look at the sources of funds, right, got our operating revenues, 72.5 million. Okay, the operating expense is going to eat most of that with the 60 million, right? And then, okay, dividends, yep. And then you look at your financing here, right? And so generally what's happening now is that that financing is covering that capital budget. So ideally, right, we would be growing cash reserves through operating activity, and you would, you know, be able to have a contribution to your capital investment from your operating activity, right? Generally, what we've done is we've aligned the capital budget with the debt financing available because as we face those cost pressures from transmission and don't see load growth, right? In order to keep rates as low as possible, the operating margin is razor thin or even negative, right? Net operating income, we often budget to be negative. Positive net income, but negative net operating income. So that's what I would see as an ideal situation where we're building cash reserves through operating activities. That is not where we are right now. And in order to do so, it would drive rates up further than we've wanted to do. Okay, so back to this. This just shows the green line across the middle is 100%. It's where your capital investment would be absolutely equal to your annual depreciation, right? So the depreciation is the amount you're expensing each year, the amount you're putting on your income statement to sort of cover past capital investments, and you can put that in rates, and then that helps you recover revenues to make future capital investments. So ideally, you should be, given that inflation happens, right, you should be investing in your capital plan at a level higher than your annual depreciation. If you only invest your annual depreciation, you're going to fall behind unless you're in a zero inflation environment forever. And so even though this FY25 capital budget was really high, and the 24 and 23 budgets were high, you can see 23 and 24, the actuals were quite a bit less. 25 was also less. 26 is even higher. It's way up here. I don't have actuals yet. But there have been years, you can see like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, the actuals were under, the actual capital investment was below the annual depreciation amount. So we've had years of over and years of under. On average, it's about 102% of annual depreciation. So one could argue that it should even be a little bit higher, that we should be, or I guess maybe another way to say it is like the fact that the capital budgets are high now is maybe not unexpected because there has been previous years of underinvestment as compared to annual depreciation.
I have to leave, but this has been excellent. I could listen for another hour.
Well, fortunately, there's only one more, there's only one more slide. So,
Well, I
we're-
know, I was
and you
supposed to
pretty
leave
much
at
know this, so you're good.
6:30 and it's like 6:30 something. But will you send that?
Yeah, we can put it on the SharePoint site.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
to do so.
That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, and then just back to where we always talk about, which is when we're putting the budget together, we'll be balancing these Moody's ratios, these Moody's metrics, the days cash on hand, and then the debt service coverage. So that is it. Thank you, and happy to take any questions. I hope it was helpful in kind of setting up the budget conversations.
Any questions?
No, just because that's how you presented it is exactly how I've looked at these in the past. So it was very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Next, we have the commissioners check-in. Anyone have any thoughts or reflections or things they want to share after the content we've discussed today? Orange. Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have
I'll second.
a second? Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3 ayes. The ayes have it. You're adjourned.
6:30 wasn't wrong.